If we could go back to the housing crisis that we're in now, just sort of as an overview, I wanted to run this past you. In 2015, when you became Prime Minister, the average house in Hamilton was about $334,000. 2024, it's $850,000, beyond the reach of many people. What happened? How did governments let this happen?
Boy, we could talk about the global economy, the inflation crisis that came from the fact that we had a once-in-a-century pandemic that had a huge impact on all of our lives. We could talk about the labor shortages that we're facing that continue to mean we need to grow our population. We're to continue to talk about inflation crisis around the world that has led to higher interest rates that have slowed things down. We can talk about the fact that Canada has only about 4% affordable housing stock across the country, whereas comparable countries like France or the UK have on the range of 17 or 18% affordable housing. And when you have leaders trying to reach out to bring in voices like that, when he refuses to reject the endorsement of Alex Jones, proven liar and conspiracy theorist, decisions taken by governments of all stripes over decades have led to this moment. Particularly the previous government, in which Pierre Poilievre was actually housing minister, that explicitly said the federal government should have absolutely nothing to do with building affordable housing or creating affordable housing. It's not rocket science to see that decisions, particularly in something like a housing market, that are taken years ago have impacts for years, for decades, for generations to come. So the question we have to ask is, given absolutely the fact that there is a crisis in housing right now, and that crisis is best defined by the fact that these young people who are working incredibly hard, many of them at great jobs, housing right now, and that crisis is best defined by the fact that these young people who are working incredibly hard, many of them at great jobs, don't have the same opportunities that Canadians in their position just 20 years ago would have to be able to buy a home. There's something wrong with the way the system is built. So the question Canadians should ask themselves, or the way the system has evolved. Now, let's take a very simple example to contrast the Conservative and the Federal Liberals' plan. The Conservatives have said we should use public land, sell it to the highest bidder so that they can create housing on it. Which sounds, at the surface of it, like that's a reasonable thought. That's a reasonable thought. Bring in a little more money for government coffers and get some more housing built. Except if you're selling public land to the highest bidder, that developer who bought that land at top dollar is not going to be building affordable housing on it. Is that how you're going to solve the housing crisis? No. It's an unreasonable plan that is focused on actually having government do less to help Canadians to invest in the future. That's why it is important for governments to step up on things like free dental care for seniors, cutting childcare fees in half, delivering free insulin and free prescription contraceptives, stepping up with programs that bring in global investments, whether it's Stellantis or Volkswagen or Honda or what have you, right across the country. These are decisions we're taking because we can, because Canada, despite what Mr. Poilievre has the best fiscal position in the G7, the lowest deficit, the lowest debt to GDP ratio, the size of our debt as proportion to the size of our economy, is lowest and getting lower. Moody's yesterday, one of the independent bond rating agencies, so you don't have to take my word for it, you don't have to take his word for it, you can look to the experts, has said Canada has confirmed its AAA rating. We are the third largest economy in the world after the US and Germany with a AAA credit rating. It means we have a responsible plan even with, or perhaps because of, all the investments we're making in supporting Canadians through this. So when Pierre Poilievre throws up his hand and says, everything's broken, we should just be really mad, without actually offering any solutions for these young people, while he continues to play footsie with extremist white nationalist organizations, you begin to see the kind of unreasonable leadership that he's proposing.
Follow-up.
Thanks for that. So,
Bit of a rant.
just as a follow-up, with federal programs, provincial programs, and municipal programs, how long is it going to take to get out of this, to reach the point where we were 2010 or so, where someone with a job and a little bit of savings for a down payment can actually buy a home?
We project that our investments and our comprehensive and ambitious housing plan, the most comprehensive and ambitious plan that Canada has ever seen, will contribute to creating close to 4 million new homes over the coming decade or so, over the coming years, less than a decade. That is going to, we're going to see real changes. When we announced cutting of the GST on purpose-built rentals, within a couple of days, a whole bunch of different companies across the country put up their hands and said, okay, we can now build thousands more purpose-built rentals because of this change that makes the math work. And similarly, across the board, what we're doing is resulting in building more homes, delivering more supply, particularly affordable supplies. So the big change is that young people that I spoke with who right now are saying, I don't even think I'll ever be able to afford a home, will suddenly say, okay, I now see that there's a path for me to be able to buy a home. Maybe not right now, maybe not this coming summer, but in the coming years, this is going to change. And this is as much about building that optimism again that young people need to have in the future of the country, which is part of why we made the decision to ask the wealthiest, often of older generations, whose money works for them, instead of necessarily them working as hard as these young people are for their money, for their salaries. We've raised the capital gain inclusion rate to make sure that the people who've done the best over the past years in a society and an economy that is tilted slightly towards them actually gets retilted a bit more towards the young people we need to continue to grow our economy long into the future.